All right, and I'm alive. Hi, my name is Tyriece Simon. This is the midweek Renegade. Riding solo here with myself. Elijah is, as you may know, in school, trying to graduate. Also, today's his birthday. If you can, comment section, wish him a happy birthday as well. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to come on here and discuss something that mainly, I wanted to discuss a topic that a friend of the show, subscriber, follower, Flat Politics had talked about in the comment section of the last video that we did on Sunday, which was John Jones. And I found it interesting. So let me see what he said exactly. You see. We were talking about John. I remember we were talking about John Jones in the last episode, and Flat Politics says, "I think the UFC thinks that Jones should consider himself lucky that he is even still in the UFC after all the negative stuff Jones has done. Jones should have argued that he wants the pay increase for all UFC fighters and that he would have other rally around him to help the cause. Dude makes more than most fighters in the UFC, and he comes off as selfish and greedy when he makes the pay issue all about him." Now, on this show, on past shows that we've done with me and Elijah and ourselves, we've talked about John Jones in this whole saga, about how John Jones wants more pay and that he feels that for him to go up to heavyweight, he should get more pay. For him to change his lifestyle, for him to take on an opponent that could be more of a threat than the light heavyweights, he feels that he should deserve more pay. And for what he's done for the sport and what he's brought in, he deserves more pay. Right? And the argument is that, well, John Jones makes enough already, or John Jones, doesn't deserve anything. John Jones is lucky he's in the UFC to begin with. Then John Jones is this and John Jones is that. Which, there, let's put the disclaimer on this already. If you do not like John Jones, I can't really argue or give you a reason to like John Jones. Like you should like who you like or dislike who you dislike. There are probably fighters that you like that I dislike, and vice versa. So that's a disclaimer there. On this video, we're only going to talk facts about John Jones, what his draw power is, one, how much he's been paid for his fights, and whether he's deserved more. Which that last part will be an opinion based, which I will give my opinion based on the facts that I present. Right? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to discuss John Jones, first his star power, then his pay, and then whether he deserves more. And let's start with this, right? So, and Flathead Politics, I hope you appreciate this. I had to do some research for this. Like I had to really do some deep digging and comb through everything to figure out exactly my points and how I present these facts to you. So I hope you appreciate this and hope the people watching can appreciate this as well. All right, so one of the things that I want to look at first when it comes to John Jones is John Jones a draw, right? So we know that Conor McGregor, he's a draw. We know that Khabib Nurmagomedov, he's a draw. Or he drew with Conor. But where does John Jones stand with the other draws, right? Where does John Jones stay at consistently? What does he bring into the table, and what does he bring in compared to the other fighters that he asks for more pay, right? So in doing research, I found that John Jones is 100% a draw, and not only 100% a draw, has been consistently drawing against high level rival opponents like Cormier, even fighters that people may not even know about but know John Jones. Right. So first and foremost, John Jones has never drew a million buy rate. He has never brought in a pay-per-view a million buys. He is not a Conor McGregor draw. He is not a Khabib only drew once with Conor, and that was the greatest, highest selling pay-per-view fight of all time, with that the 2.4 million, the 2.4 million buys. Khabib and Conor, right? Conor by itself has only drew in 1 million, which is great for the UFC. John Jones, however, John Jones' highest buy rate ever is UFC 214, Jones vs. Cormier 2, which drew in 860,000 buys. Right? 860,000 buys is John Jones' highest buy rate he ever brought in. Jones vs. Cormier, legendary rivalry. The second fight was the most anticipated fight of that year. John Jones, served suspension, coming back to reclaim a title that Cormier had won. Cormier is trying to solidify himself as the greatest light heavyweight of all time. We know what happens. John Jones defeats Cormier by knockout, and that pretty much ended the rivalry there, at least in fighting. It'll be an ongoing thing forever, it seems like. Besides that, Jones Cormier won again. Jones Cormier again brought in 800,000 buys. That's UFC 182. Let's go lower and lower down the buy rate. So UFC 232, Jones versus Gustafsson. This is John Jones comeback versus Gustafsson, the rematch, 700,000. Jones versus Evans, UFC 145, 700,000. Jones versus Smith, UFC 235. Again, people not really know who Anthony Smith is, coming off of the John Jones Gustafsson fight. Now they know who Anthony Smith is. Anthony Smith was somebody that defeated Vitor Belfort, defeated Rashad Evans. So he was somebody that was on the come up at that time at light heavyweight. He reinvented himself from being a middleweight to now being a light heavyweight. But people didn't really know Anthony Smith like that, and he became more of a household name after the fight. Still, that fight did 650,000 buys. Jones versus Sonnen, that rivalry, UFC 159, 530,000. UFC 135, Jones versus Rampage, 520,000. UFC 140, Jones versus Machida, 485,000. UFC 152, Jones versus Belfort, 450,000. UFC 128, Shogun versus Jones, 445,000. That's when Jones won the title. UFC 172, Jones versus Teixeira, 350,000. UFC 197, Jones versus St. Preux. Again, this was a fight that kind of just happened. I believe Jones, or I believe St. Preux, he was stepping in on short notice to fight Jones, and John Jones beats him. People don't really know who St. Preux is, and he's not really, he's somebody that has kind of fallen out of the top 10. But 322,000. UFC 165, Jones versus Gus, 310,000. That is the lowest that John Jones has ever drew, according to Tapology. This is all according to Tapology, which again, Tapology does a great job in doing their research and putting detailing everything with fighters and pay-per-views and promotions in a whole. Really good source in terms of going to them for detailed events and stuff like that. But on record, Jones versus Gus is the most notable lowest buy rate that John Jones has had. UFC 165. Now, what's not on here is Jones versus Reyes. What's not on here is Jones versus who was the other? Santos, right? But that by far is the lowest, 310,000. So the lowest that John Jones has ever drew, according to Tapology, is 310,000. Right? There is not a fighter in the UFC right now, or there's maybe a handful of active fighters right now that can draw in, 300,000 alone, and that's John Jones. That's John Jones' lowest buy rate, right? John Jones has, again, 650,000 with Anthony Smith, with somebody that people didn't really know at the time. His and fighters that they do know of, I guess, that are rivals to John Jones, does really well. Cormier is his highest ever, 800 and was it 850? Let me check here. 860,000 buys, right? That's also Cormier's highest selling by pay-per-view also. Jones versus Cormier 1, 800,000. Jones versus Gus 2, 700,000. When Jones has a rival or Jones has an opponent that people can believe in that can beat Jon Jones, that pay-per-view really does well. It's also it's similar but different to the Mayweather effect, where people just want to see Mayweather get beat up or get beat. And it's the same as Jon Jones, but the opponents that Mayweather faces or that have faced, you generally knew that they weren't going to beat Jon Jones. Maybe Canelo maybe Pacquiao, but Pacquiao at that time, that fight happened way after than they should have had. Canelo maybe, but even that one was a young Canelo. Generally, Mayweather has fought fighters that pretty much you want to see Mayweather get beat up, but you knew that Mayweather was going to win. Jon Jones, Cormier 1, we didn't know exactly how that fight was going to go. Cormier 2, we didn't know exactly how that fight was going to go. Gus 2, that was an interesting dynamic. You can see Jon Jones winning those fights, yes, but they were a little bit more, what could happen. And in comparison, there's not any really other fighter on the active UFC roster that could pull that number. The only one. So one of the things I found interesting in doing this research was that the only person right now in the UFC that is shown to be a consistent draw is there's two fighters technically, but one is still to remain to be seen, and I'll get to him in a second. Israel Adesanya is the only person besides a McGregor or a Jon Jones who are active on the roster that can pull in a big buy rate. Adesanya pulled in with John Blachowicz 800,000 buys, which is great, and that surprised me of how big of a draw Adesanya is already. And he still has a lot more fights he could do. And it's interesting to see what his next fight will be with Vettori next month with Nate Diaz and Brendan Moreno versus Figueiredo on that card. But Adesanya could pull in 800,000 buys. Adesanya with Costa, 700,000 buys. So he's trending upwards. We're meant to see what he's going to do next month with Vettori. But if Adesanya could pull in another 700,000 buys or close to that, then you're looking at somebody that is a huge star that is, with Conor McGregor, we'll see what happens with this Poirier fight, but Conor McGregor loses that fight, his star power is going to drop a little bit. I would assume his buy rate drops a little bit, or his activity in the UFC drops a little bit as well. So the only person besides Jon Jones that is a solidified star power, as a draw, is Adesanya. Again, Adesanya, 800,000 buys with Blachowicz, with Costa 700,000. Right, so he's the only one that you could say is a draw right now, besides Jon Jones, besides Cormier. Besides McGregor that's on an active roster. Besides that, the other person that the jury is still out on him. Flash. I'm listening, but can't really interact in the chat at work. Good show, Ty. Thank you, Flash. This was a response to your comment about Jon Jones, and I thought it was really interesting. With all the talk about Jon Jones, I wanted to get a little bit more about Jon Jones and really figure out whether he is, and this is pocket watching, but whether he deserves more and whether he's in the right. But back to the star power in the UFC right now, which I thought was interesting. Other than Adesanya, who again 800,000 buys with the last fight, 700,000 with Costa, the only other fighter that is drawing is Kamaru Usman, and that's surprising to me because Kamaru Usman with Masvidal drew in their first fight 1.3 million buys, which is incredible. Somebody besides McGregor brought in 1.3 million. Khabib didn't do that. Khabib didn't do that with Gaethje. Khabib didn't do that with Iaquinta. Khabib didn't do that with Poirier. The only person to do that, do 1.1 million without being Conor McGregor being attached to it, is Kamaru Usman. Now you can say Masvidal is also a draw, and that it's Masvidal's on it too. But Masvidal versus Nate Diaz didn't really do well in the buy rate. Now it grew attention, but it didn't really do as well as the buy rate. It's not even acknowledged. Kamaru Usman versus Masvidal too, 700,000 buys. And the jury's still out on Masvidal because you could say there's 3 title fights attached to it. There's Weili Zhang was on the last one, which I think Weili Zhang is a draw that is the UFC. I would hope they could try to give her more favorable matchups and maybe grow as a star, because she's becoming an international star, and maybe the Rose and Weili Zhang 2 fight, if they were to do that in Asia, that could be a big fight as well. But besides that, on paper, Usman is the 3rd draw or the 4th draw besides Conor McGregor, Adesanya, Jon Jones, is Usman. Now you can say who else is on that list? The only person left is Miocic, Stipe Miocic, the former UFC heavyweight champion, which Dana White wanted to do Stipe versus Jon Jones, which we'll get to that later. Stipe with Cormier did 500,000 buys. His highest selling pay-per-view of all time is 500,000 buys. Is Stipe's best. Below that is Stipe versus Ngannou, which is 380,000. Below that, Miocic versus Cormier won 380,000. Right, that is Miocic's number. So Miocic is also on that. Also has the ability to pull in 300,000 buys. But again, we're looking at other fighters that can't even do that. I was surprised by this. Max Holloway. Max Holloway's highest pay-per-view ever is 300,000 buys versus Ortega. UFC 231 was Max versus Ortega was 300,000 buys. I believe, and this is I regard as one of the best pay-per-views at the time, with Adesanya and Gastelum and Poirier and Holloway. That only did, I believe, 100,000. Holloway versus Poirier 2 only did 100,000 buys. In comparison, so again, Tapology has all the list of high selling pay-per-views of all time. Demetrius Johnson, who people regarded as a boring champion and that he couldn't draw and everything like that. Demetrius Johnson, back in his day, drew more than Dustin Poirier and Holloway. Demetrius Johnson drew more than a lot of the fighters in the UFC currently right now. That's think about that. Demetrius Johnson sold more than a lot of active fighters on the UFC roster, and he was regarded as somebody that couldn't draw. Right, and that's a narrative. The narrative is that oh, he can't draw, he can't do this, he can't do that, and that's why we're not getting enough pay. Meanwhile, you look at the history, you look at who's doing what now. Demetrius Johnson sells more than most fighters in the UFC active roster today. He sold more than Nate Diaz versus Masvidal. That's not even acknowledged. So again, the narrative and this person can't draw and that person can't draw, and this is why we're not getting enough pay is bullshit. Complete bullshit, because there's only a few in the UFC that can. And I listed them off to you. Conor McGregor, he may or may not be active. We'll see how this next fight goes. If he loses his next fight to Poirier, I don't know if you see him as active as he is before, or I don't know if the buy rate's going to be the same. Israel Adesanya is somebody that is solidified now that can draw 800,000 buys with Blachowicz, 700,000 with Costa. He can draw. Jon Jones, someone that consistently has drew over the course of his career. And Kamaru Usman, who was somebody that still needs to be seen what he does with somebody else, but he has drawn with Masvidal twice. He also drew on 1.6 million. And Stipe Miocic, who 300,000. Everybody else besides that, you look at the UFC rankings, you look at who your champions right now is. Peter Yan, can he draw? Can he pull in 300,000 buys? Valentina Shevchenko, she has not been a main event for a reason. She's been a co-main event. Can Rose Namajunas draw? She didn't draw with Andrade. Francis Ngannou's biggest draw so far was with Stipe, left 300,000. Amanda Nunes, maybe, but Amanda Nunes, how much left that she has left to do, and she's not drawing nowhere near Adesanya or John Jones or these other names I mentioned. So you really only have maybe five on counting on one hand 5 draws, and one of them you're not even sure about. Kamaru Usman. We'll see what's next for him in his fight against the winner of possibly Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz. So when you're looking at that, why wouldn't you reward a Adesanya who's going to be active? Why wouldn't you reward a John Jones who's going to be active? Why wouldn't you reward a Kamaru still be the same, but John Jones and Adesanya for sure, and that's why that fight was going to do such big numbers, was because of the draw power between both of them. Right, so John Jones is a draw. No matter what people say that John Jones can't draw or John Jones isn't a draw, he's not a draw as Conor McGregor. He's drawn consistently over the course of his career. It is before the digital era where you can buy pay-per-views on an app. This is before the ESPN Plus. We're talking about back in the UFC's on Spike TV days. So that I thought was interesting. What I also thought was interesting. So we know that John Jones is the draw. Now, what I thought was interesting was going back and looking at John Jones's pay. So Vlad, you talked about John Jones and how he's being greedy and how he should be fighting for the fighters and stuff like that. First and foremost, the fighters need to collectively come together and fight for the fighters. One person can't come up and say, "Hey, we deserve more pay." It's going to take a collective group. It's going to take a complete stop for fight in the UFC's organization for the fighters to not meet the demands, but for the fighters to get the attention of the UFC. For the fighters to get the attention of the UFC and to create a dialogue, it would need I would say your biggest stars plus maybe 60% of the roster. And even that's questionable, right? But this is an article from Sportskeeda by Gabriel Coleman. He's the senior analyst, and he looked at John when he did publish an article talking about John Jones's pay. I talked about how John Jones' most lucrative fight to date was $580,000 for his fight against Cormier. John Jones' biggest payday to date on his purse is $580,000 to Cormier, which was, again, UFC 214 was ruled no contest. And interesting enough, so John Jones versus Cormier 2, I believe what happened was Cormier made more than John Jones that fight. Let me see. Yeah, Cormier made $1 million. Cormier made $1 million compared to John Jones making $500,000 for that fight. But I'm not going all over the place. Bear with me here. But this is John Jones' pay. Ready? So going from him being the champion, from winning the championship, right? So John Jones for his fight against, I'm only going to talk about show money, not performance of the night or whatever. But John Jones versus Shogun, his show money was $700,000, right? And then win money, he pocketed $140,000. For show money for Quentin Rampage Jackson, $200,000 for show money. Lyoto Machida, $400,000. Rashad Evans, $400,000. Vitor Belfort, $400,000. His win over Sonnen, 400,000. Gustafsson, the first fight, 450,000. Teixeira, 400,000. Cormier, this is where John Jones really got his base pay in terms of 500,000 was with the first Cormier fight. Right, so Cormier was 500,000, St. Preux was 500,000. Cormier again 500,000, Gustafsson 500,000, Smith 500,000, Santos 500,000, Dominic Reyes 500,000. Right, so John Jones consistently since UFC 182. March 1st, 2015. That was John Jones' first 500,000 payday. Before that, he was making, below 500,000. Right, and you add win bonuses to that too. John Jones' pockets maybe, getting his highest ever was 580,000. So that the highest John Jones ever made in the UFC, including a win bonus, is 580,000. The Santos fight, 500,000. He had 440,000 for his Reebok. Smith Reebok. So with the Reebok deal, he's earned 540,000. But consistently, John Jones has his base, his minimum has been 500,000. And you could add on performance of the night bonuses, you could add on whatever, but that's all he's gotten, right? John Jones in his career has never came in with a million buy rate, with a million base pay. You think of all of his wins, you think of who he's fought. You're probably gonna hear a phone just ring in a second, but house phone. But John Jones has been underpaid his entire career. This is a guy that is regarded as the greatest of all time. This is a guy that is regarded as, the greatest fighter to ever walk in the UFC octagon. And he has his highest paid ever is 580,000. That's not off. Khabib has earned $1 million. Conor, he's earned $1 million. Dustin Poirier, his last fight, he earned $1 million. John Jones has never got to $1 million. Now, over the course of his career, he's made millions. Adding everything up, he has made millions. But then taxes and expenses and stuff like that. So you can see how that goes away fast. John Jones is a draw, which we've pointed out. John Jones has been underpaid, which I've pointed out. So at one point in John Jones' career that he has left, is John Jones going to get paid the money that he deserves? And this is where we go into the third point. Does John Jones deserve money? Yes, John Jones does. John Jones maybe has, if we're being honest, 4 to 5 big fights left in him. John Jones has, he cleared out the UFC light heavyweight division twice. John Jones doesn't really have a lot of money fights left. The Cormier fight is done. That fight would never happen. That fight with a guaranteed 800,000 buy rate. That will never happen again. Cormier's retired. That John Jones beat him twice. There's no rivalry there, right? John Jones, there's nobody in the heavyweight division right now that they're trying to figure things out now. And it's working itself out. John Jones' only option to get a big pay-per-view, right? Because John Jones, with a rival, with somebody that people know is a threat, brings in money. John Jones going up to heavyweight is that. John Jones going up to heavyweight and fighting challengers who have one-punch knockout power, who are possibly bigger than John Jones, possibly may not be as athletic, but can still do a lot of damage and could create long-term issues for John Jones in his future beyond fighting. That's a whole other problem. That's a whole other reason to say, okay, for the UFC, for the light heavyweight division, which I've been in and dominated for years and years, I have made the highest I've made is 500,000 buys. 500,000. I have run all this money for the UFC consistently. No other fighter consistently has done so and you look at the pay history, stuff like that, pay-per-view history, nobody in UFC has consistently done so as much as I have. No other fighter on active roster can do what I do. And I could be a legit champion. I could legit fight for you. I could legit, maybe fight 2 times a year, 3 times a year. And I could consistently bring in possibly 400,000 to 500,000 buys. That's all the reason in the world to give him pay. Plus, Dana White has regarded him as the greatest of all time. He's regarded as the greatest of all time, above Khabib, above Conor McGregor, above all the names that have gotten more money than Jon Jones has in one fight. So where do we end with this, right? Where do we go from here, right? Jon Jones knows that a Francis Ngannou fight, Francis Ngannou, who has yet to draw, who's only drew once with Stipe, that's his highest draw was 300,000 buys. Jon Jones is the A side in this fight. Jon Jones versus Ngannou, somebody that has one punch knockout power, who could possibly end careers, who could possibly, no matter how athletic Jon Jones could be or how skilled he is, all it takes is one punch to defeat Jon Jones. That is a draw. That is on the level of a Daniel Cormier. That is on the level of a Gustafsson. That is somebody that people can invest in and think Jon Jones, who you may love or hate, can be in the worst matchup of his entire career. Is somebody that's way bigger than him, has one punch knockout power. With Jon Jones has never been known for his knockout power. You could see why Jon Jones is like, okay, for this fight, I should not be getting paid 500,000. I should at least be getting $1 million. The minimum is $1 million, and we're going from there. This is the Jon Jones, and we talk about money fights and big fights, stuff like that. Jon Jones doesn't have that much. The only fights that are money fights for him that I would think is Stipe, Ngannou, and if Israel Adesanya wants to go up in weight, Israel Adesanya. But even that's iffy now because Israel Adesanya lost to Blachowicz in the way he did. We have to see where Israel Adesanya goes with the Vettori fight. But that's it. Stipe and Ngannou are the biggest fights that Jon Jones can have in his career. That's why I say maybe four fights left in his career. Jon Jones is also getting older. He's also going to get slower. He's also like the training, all that. It's going to take its toll. He had to be four fights at the most, I think, in his career before he ran into the sunset. So at what point does Jon Jones get his money? He has Ngannou. He has Stipe possibly. Stipe doesn't retire. That's it at heavyweight. He has 2 fights, 2 big fights. Israel Adesanya, we have to wait to see how he does against Vettori, but we've seen him at 205. How they do at heavyweight? That's an even bigger an issue. So by me laying this out there, by me saying, okay, yes, he's a draw. He's drawn consistently. He's compared to other fighters. He has drawn on the active roster. He has drawn more than they have. Max Holloway, who everybody loves, is not, his highest ever is 300,000 against Ortega. There's not really other people on the card that can draw over 100,000. Which we laughed at with Demetrius Johnson. We laughed at 100,000 buys, and now we're hoping that a fighter can pull that. We never heard about Figueiredo versus Moreno, the first one. We never heard about that card. We never heard from about Nate Diaz and Masvidal want the fight in Madison Square Garden. We never heard about that fight, but we do hear about the fights that do draw. Jon Jones has consistently been brought up in the names that can draw. We know that Jon Jones is underpaid. We see it. We've seen he only got his first 500,000 purse was with Cormier 1, and he's consistently made 500,000 buys. But how much did that really go? Right? You got trainers, you have obligations. He's also been out of the UFC for a while with the stuff outside the UFC, which people may say, okay, because of the hitting the pregnant lady because of the drugs and stuff like that. Jon Jones doesn't deserve these things. But which may be true in your case, may be fair. But the UFC took Jon Jones anyway. The UFC rode Jon Jones anyway. Why? Not because it was the right thing to do. It was because Jon Jones makes the money. So if Jon Jones could make us money, let's keep him. So that the whole he did drugs, he's a degenerate, he did this, he did that. That's no one void with this conversation. He could be a horrible human being. But it doesn't refute the fact that UFC has rode and has used Jon Jones to make more money for them. And Jon Jones has gotten a fraction of what the UFC has made off of him in his entire career. With 2 fights left, probably with Stipe, probably with Ngannou, maybe how that fights go. There's rematches or trilogies involved or whatever. But let's be honest, it's only 2 fighters that Jon Jones can make that money now with in the heavyweight division, and that's Stipe and Ngannou. And he's also getting older. Like there is no doubt in my mind that not only is Jon Jones right, Jon Jones is old money, if you ask me. Someone that is regarded as the greatest of all time, someone that has elevated the sport, somebody that has, carried the UFC banner for Battle for Words on his back. And when people say greatest athletes in the world, Jon Jones is on that list of the greatest to ever do it in his sport. And he's been paid less than a Conor McGregor. He's been paid less than a Dustin Poirier. He's been paid less than a Khabib. Yeah, it's time for him to get a base salary of $1 million. And we're lowballing it there. It should be negotiating starting at $1 million and then go from there. So I would love to hear your comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on if I'm wrong. Do you think I'm missing something, or if I'm off on things? Please tell me. I would love to get your perspective on it, because I just don't see the argument for one why fighters should get any more money is beyond me, but why Jon Jones, the greatest MMA fighter of all time, the greatest UFC fighter of all time, this is words from the UFC president Dana White, why he has to beg to get $1 million. That is my question to you. Why does Jon Jones have to beg to get more money, to even get $1 million? So, but that's it. That's all on the Jon Jones thing. You can love him, you can hate him. I'm not asking you to like him. I'm not asking you to hate him. I'm just asking you to look at the facts, look at what's out there, and just go from there. And you can see how, if I'm Jon Jones, I'm getting fucked from both sides. And I have maybe 2 fights left in my career, and I have and the most I've made is $580,000, and I'm the greatest of all time. You said I was saying in the comments in your other vids that Boney's past was the reason why his pay is what it is. I would say that his past has nothing to do with the pay. I think the UFC. He said you made some great points that I agree with regarding Boney. Yeah, his past is his past is his past at this point, right? And this is just my opinion on this. His past is his past when the UFC accepted him anyway. When the UFC used Jon Jones' negative past to highlight that and promote that into making Jon Jones a more hateable, or a giving him a redemption story or stuff like that. Once the UFC has used footages of Jon Jones being arrested which the Cormier John Jones 2 promo was one of the greatest UFC promos of all time, right? Because it was honest. It did give a perspective of John Jones has gone through this and gone through that, and he's trying to redeem that. Like that's what made that fight what it was. Was redemption, was UFC using that. But once the UFC used John Jones's personal negative lifestyle in part and with the promotion with John Jones, is when you can't make that argument anymore. You cannot make the argument that John Jones' past is the reason why you're getting paid like this, because the UFC has used that and to make more money off of him. They use that to make more money off of him. So he says, I agree with you 100%. Now he deserves a pay increase. Yeah, all fighters deserve a pay increase. For what they do, all fighters should get a pay increase or should get some percentage of the pie, especially if you're regarding them as the greatest to ever do it. But John Jones in particular is somebody that has been owed money like crazy. Think about this. John Jones' highest paid, again, was $500,000. He has consistently brought in a high buy rate. There's nobody in the UFC that can say that. There's no one that could be active like a John Jones. And now John Jones how old is John Jones? Let me see real quick. John Jones' age. 33. John Jones is 33 years old. I think he's going to be 34 in July. He's probably not fighting this year. So we're saying John Jones has 2 fights left at 34 years old. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. And then it goes to the point of, well, John Jones could walk away from the sport. The UFC will not let John Jones go. The UFC will hold out. They will keep John Jones under contract. Look at what they did. Look at what they did. This is something that's off topic, but George St. Pierre wanted to fight Oscar De La Hoya. George St. Pierre has been retired from MMA for at least 3 years now. We beat Michael Bisping in New York. That was the last of George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre still can't do anything outside of movies and act. He can't fight anywhere. Dan Hardy had to plead and beg the UFC to get him off his contract so he could fight somewhere else. First, he had to plead and beg to even fight in the first place. Nick Diaz, you know that story. Nate Diaz, you know that story. There's too many instances, there's too many occurrences that tells you that the UFC are not in the business for the fighters. They're in the business of, hey, we're going to make money, we're going to pay you less, and we're going to find that we can do it with you, without you. Now more than ever with the ESPN Plus deal. So that's what John Jones is at. John Jones is at a point now where he has no power. He has no leverage. He can't go anywhere. He can't fight anywhere. He can't make money. And he has to take what the UFC gives to him. Or the UFC comes to their senses and they're able to negotiate and give him more money. But the fact that John Jones, who's the greatest of all time, has to beg or plead for $1 million to fighting, to going up to heavyweight, that's going to make the UFC way more money in return, is beyond me. So that's all I have to say about the John Jones situation. I'm team John Jones with this. I'm team fighter with anything, but especially with this, with somebody that is the greatest of all time, you gotta start paying them like it. So, but that's 44 minutes of John Jones talk. But I could talk about this for hours. Lastly, I wanted to, before I end here, I wanted to thank everybody. I wanted to thank not only so I did a video interview, put it out on Tuesday with Sean Felton, who's fighting in Bellator lightweight. He's gonna be fighting Viu Gonzalez, making his Bellator debut. And I was blown away by the responses, and one, because Sean Felton, he has a fan base like crazy. You can go back and look at videos that I've done in the past with fighters and look at Sean Felton. You make the judgment of yourself, but man, I was blown away by the feedback from that. And I've just been blown away with how this channel has grown. I remember when this channel had, in the teens of subscribers, and now we're at 40,000, 40, not 40,000, 40, hopefully 40,000. We're at 40. And he said, if Bones need a lawyer, he should call you, Ty. Excellent points on the page. Yeah, man, it's something where it's like, it's information is out there. We don't have to make speculate on anymore. We can look at the buys. We can look at the pay-per-views. We can look at who's drawing, who's not drawing, and only a handful of people in the UFC are drawn. And he's somebody that has drew for years and years and years consistently. That's still here. Ronda Rousey is not here. Brock Lesnar is not here. He was drawing when they was there, and he's still here. So maybe it's time for him to get his meal. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody that subscribed, thank everybody that's watched our videos, watch our content, thank everybody that has left a like, a dislike, that shared, that took the time to comment and everything. You guys really make this, with me and Elijah have a lot of things going on behind the scenes with work and stuff like that, with us not feeling the best on doing a show or putting out content. You guys have given us the strength to continue doing what we do and to, talk to you guys and have this dialogue. And we love it. Yeah, I seen that. I seen that flag. I seen you talk to Sean's on it. And growing this community, talking to you, Flathead, talking to Loco, talking to Lego Poppy. If I'm missing anybody, please, everybody that subscribed to this channel, and that's watched our videos, watched our stuff, I appreciate you all. And we're going to keep going. We're going to, keep moving. We're going to keep putting content out, and keep this dialogue going. But I just want to take a quick minute and just thank everybody that has subscribed and everybody that has given us the love back. We truly, truly, truly appreciate it. And lastly, if you can, in the comment section, of course, leave a like, leave a share, subscribe if you haven't already. But today is Elijah's birthday. So if you can, in the comment section, I think he will get a kick out of it. Tell your boy, my co-host, my friend, my brother, Elijah, happy birthday as well. So hope he's watching this and he's out there gonna celebrate tonight. So we'll be back on. We gotta figure out if we're gonna do a Saturday show or a Sunday show, because the UFC is on early on Saturday. I think they're on at 4:00, the main card. So we're looking at possibly 6:00, 7:00. The fight card will be over. So we may be able to cram in a Bellator and a UFC talk that same day. I will leave a video description on Saturday. I'm gonna go with Elijah. I'm talking with him, and we'll figure out what we're gonna do. We're gonna do both shows on Saturday evening, or if we're gonna do a Saturday show and then a Sunday show. But you're gonna hear a Bellator review, and you're gonna get a UFC review this week. So definitely look out for that. All right, signing off. My name is Tyriece Simon. This has been Midweek Renegade. Have a nice day, guys, and